Alrighty, Catanians, by popular demand, I will be ranking my favorite progress cards. Let's go from worst to most favorite. That way it can get more exciting as the video goes along. Okay, let's go from left to right. We could go right to left like manga, but we are in the United States of America, not in Japan. So we'll start with the blue progress cards. Sorry for a little glare from the ceiling light. But starting it off, we have Intrigue. Now, you have to keep in mind that Intrigue, and all these progress cards are getting ranked, and there's some really good ones, so someone's going to have to start at the bottom, and others are just way too good. So we're going to have to go with Intrigue at the bottom. Now, in certain scenarios, this card is so crucial. It does have its importance in the game, but if you're just looking at kind of the power of a progress card, the way it can screw a player over, in many situations, not just one, then I'm going to have to rank this one at the bottom. Now, it allows you to displace an opponent's knight without using a knight of your own, just by the power of the Intrigue progress card. Then that player either has to move their knight to another open road section, or if they don't have one, it gets taken off the board. And then you are free to place a knight in that intersection that you kick their knight out of, or if that intersection is 2 roads away from any settlement on the board, city or settlement, you can place a settlement of your own in that open spot. So that is very, very cool. But you have to point a road, or if you're playing Seafarers with Cities and Knights, you have to point a ship towards an opponent's knight, then play this card, and then you are off to having some fun. All progress cards kind of screw over all the players, or an opponent, but blue progress cards seem to do it with some malice, with some very specific intent. Okay, so moving on, we have the Constitution card that nets you 1 victory point for free just by having blue city improvements and happy to get a blue dice roll with the corresponding red dice number with the number of city improvements that you have. So I rank this one second last because it's just kind of boring. Just 1 victory point. It doesn't allow you to do anything in the game. It only progresses you further by giving you a victory point, which I know is huge, but I'm all about the excitement of Cities and Knights and the strategy that it brings. So I'm just going to have to rank this one low because as soon as you get it, you have to reveal it immediately, and then it goes right back in, shuffled back into the blue progress card stack. So yeah, not much fun going on there. Okay, so next for the third worst, we have Warlord, and Warlord is pretty good. If you are struggling for wheat in the game, because people keep shutting down your 6 wheat or your 8 wheat, maybe you even have a 5 or 9 wheat, then you can play Warlord if you've paid enough coin to get blue progress cards, and you can activate all your knights for free. And let's say you have like 4 or 5 knights on the board, which can happen midway or later through the game. With 1 progress card, instead of 4 or 5 wheat, you can activate all 4 or 5 of those knights. So that is a very, very nice thing to have, especially if you are spending that wheat, trading it in a 2-for-1 weight, 2-for-1 rate if you have the merchant or if you have a wheat port, or if you're trying to build more settlements, more cities, what have you. Warlord is very nice to have, but it just keeps getting better. Next we have Saboteur, and this one it's pretty good. Now, the only time that I seem to get Saboteur in the game is when other players quickly are spending like all their resources and commodities, so by the time they end their turn and it comes to me and I have Saboteur and I'm ready to use it, those opponent players have like 2, 3, sometimes 5 cards in their hand, so they have to get rid of half the cards if I play this progress card. But I would rather play it in a situation where all opposing 2 or all opposing 3 players, if I'm playing in a 4-player game, have all 3 of my opponents have like 15 cards in their hand, and watch as each and every one of them has to get rid of 7 cards, because it does round down when you cut an odd number in half. So Saboteur is nice. I think the main time I love using it is when I kind of notice an opponent is getting a lot of commodities for a certain metropolis that maybe we're both trying to go for, and I can play Saboteur and force them to burn a bunch of cards, either burn all the resources to keep the commodities, or actually they have a bunch of commodities and only a couple resources, so they end up having to burn commodities as well. So this can be a very fun card. You just got to count what other cards are coming into other players' hands. Try to keep a track of what they're spending and what city improvements they've been getting or trying to work for. So very cool card to keep in mind. Next, we have Diplomat. And Diplomat can really, really get on players' nerves if it is used against them. So it allows you to remove any open road they have on the board just off the board. It just immediately gets taken off. So what I mean by open road is, let's say they throw down a settlement and they point a road out towards somewhere, maybe for their starting settlement, and then they don't place a knight at the end of that open road. They don't close the road, so to speak. So if it just stays open for a long time and then you play Diplomat, you can choose to remove that open road or another open road on the board and just take it off the board. Additionally, they really thought things through when they made these progress cards, because in Diplomat, you can not only can you remove an open road from another player, if you don't want to screw someone else over and you want to help yourself out in a certain situation and you're not able to build a road because you don't have a brick and a wood in your hand, you can take an open road from one of your road systems, and let's say your other road system is very close to allowing you to, build a settlement at another spot on the board. You can take the open road from the first road system, bring it all the way over to your other road system, place it there, and then maybe you have the cards in your hand to build a settlement, but you didn't have the cards in your hand to build a road and a settlement. So this is where Diplomat can come in handy to help you or to screw over another player, or sometimes both if you are racing for the same spot as another player. So just keep that in mind. Next, we'll move on to Wedding. Wedding is really good. Now we're getting into the cream of the crop here in terms of the blue progress cards. If you play this card strategically, and what I mean by that is, let's say it's your turn, because obviously you can only play progress cards on your turn, and you have, 5 victory points, and some of the other players have 6 or more victory points. Let's say in your hand you have the cards to build a city. Now, this very strategic move would be, before playing your city, to then jump up to 6 victory points and tie some of those other opposing players. You play Wedding before you build the city. That way, any player with more victory points than you has to give you 2 cards of their choice. So you grab those cards from them first, then you build your city. Then you're like, okay, I've played the Wedding and I've gotten resources from them, and then now I played my city, instead of the reverse, where you would not be able to use Wedding if you played the city first and tied some other players for victory points. You would end up getting less cards because you wouldn't be able to play Wedding. So always play Wedding, anytime you're going to get resources for sure. Always check on the other players' player icons to make sure they have cards in their hand, or the ones who have more victory points than you, to make sure you're actually going to get resources. Don't just play it automatically just because you see the green highlight around the card if you're playing on Catan Universe. Make sure players have cards that have more victory points than you, and make sure you play it before you build any victory points that turn, so you don't accidentally tie with another player who would have had to give you 2 cards of their choice. Moving up to Deserter. Now, I love Deserter because sometimes you find yourself in a match of cities and knights, and it's the first time the barbarians are making their way to attacking the island, and you're trying to get the dice rolls to get a sheep, an ore, and a wheat, but you just can't quite get all 3. But let's say you were able to get an ore and a coin off of a very crucial dice roll. You spent the coin, you got city improvements level 1 on the blue side, and then you are actually graced with a Deserter Progress card before the Barbarians attack for the first time. You wait until another player builds a knight and maybe even activates it, and then you choose to steal from them with Deserter on your turn before the Barbarians attack for the first time. That way, their knight gets taken off the board, and then you get to place a knight of equal strength on the board. And then you will be protected from the Barbarians, and most likely they will lose a city because they may not be able to build a second knight and activate it before the Barbarians attack or invade the island of Catan. So very crucial card to be able to use early on, but also later in the game if you are battling it out for Defender of Catan victory points. And actually, I just found out that you can earn up to 6 maximum Defender of Catan victory points in the real-life board game. Now, I don't know how they do it in Catan Universe, because I think I've gotten a maximum of 6 Defender of Catan victory points. You can check that out in one of my previous videos. I've never gotten more than that, but come to find out, in the real-life board game, there's only 6 of the tokens that denote Defender of Catan victory points. So that's the maximum. But always make sure you play Deserter if you're one of those people that loves having the most knight strength on the board and thus getting Defender of Catan victory points as part of your overall strategy to win the game in any Cities and Knights expansion, any Seafarers expansion, or the first island, doesn't matter. If that's your strategy, Deserter cards are going to be very, very helpful to you. And you're going to want to make sure you build on a good ore hex with a good number, so you're going to get coin off of that city very often. Let's move up to Bishop. Man, Bishop is one of my favorites. It's the top 2. It's the second one. Now, Bishop, of course, is you're moving the robber, but if you place it on a hex with 2 opponents that are built on that hex, you get to draw a card from each of them. Not just one, not just the normal robber where you just shut down a hex, you choose from one player if 2 players are built on it. No, you choose a card from both of them. Now keep in mind, this only moves the robber. It does not move the pirate ship if you are playing Cities and Knights with Seafarers, because as the card explicitly states in the first sentence, move the robber, not the pirate ship. Now, my favorite way to play Bishop is when I roll the dice, I see what resources, let them be gathered, and then before I do anything else, before I build anything, before I try to trade with anyone, I will throw Bishop down, ideally on a hex. If I'm playing a 4-player game of Cities and Knights, I will throw the Bishop down if all 3 opponent players are built on the same hex, no matter what the hex is. I don't care if it's a 2 on lumber or a 2 on 12 on brick. I am throwing the Bishop robber down on that hex so I can get up to 3 cards on a single robber shutdown with the Bishop progress card. Because later on, you know the robber's just going to get moved again. So why not, instead of getting 1 card off of a robber move, get up to 3? And then from the remainder of your turn, you have those extra resources that may influence what you do in your turn. You may actually be able to build more than you were initially able to, or you may be in a spot where you can have more resources or commodities to trade in at a 2-for-1 rate if you have merchant or you're built on some good ports. Or you may have gotten commodities that allow you to get the next city improvement of whatever color that you're working on. So Bishop, very, very hot card to always have, and it is the worst when someone uses Spy and steals it from you. And speaking of Spy, that brings us to our absolute favorite blue progress card. Spy just is never, ever wanted. When someone uses it against you, you're like, okay, I know they're going to take my best, most favorite progress card in my hand. They almost always do. It's very surprising when someone uses Spy and they take a progress card from your hand that wasn't seemingly the best in your opinion. Of course, this is the most unorthodox thing I've seen with progress cards. I can't remember if I got it on video, but someone had spy. They spied on someone else. That person also had spy, so the initial person that used spy on them stole their spy with the first spy, so now they have the second spy. They then used the second spy to spy on a different opponent, and then they found a third spy, and as you can see here, there's only 3 spies total. So they stole the third spy from the other opponent, and then used it again on any player they wished to use it on, and thus you are able to use at least 4 progress cards in that turn. If not, let's see, if you use 3 spies and you steal a progress card from 3 other players, you're playing a 4-player game, you can use up to 6 progress cards. Actually, technically 7, because you're allowed to hold 5 on your turn, if you can follow all that jargon. But yeah, technically, if you earn a progress card on your turn, you already have 4, you're allowed to hold the 5th one. And then if you use spy, you go down to 4, but then you end up stealing 2 other spies from people, so that does push you up to 7. So that's pretty crazy. Plus, on the last spy, you will steal a progress card that's not spy from another player. So is that 8? That might be 8, actually. That's crazy. If you were able to use 8 progress cards in a single turn, 7 or 8, whatever the maximum is, I need to make a video on that. That's insanely unorthodox. But anyways, I love spy because I always end up finding something that I really, really need that advances my game, and that other player was really, really hoping to be able to use that when it got to their turn, but I go ahead and take it and either use it for myself on my same turn, or sometimes I'll spy on an Alchemist, which is over on the green progress card side, and I'll steal it and then wait for my turn to come around again, and then roll whatever I want. But we'll get to Alchemist. So that is the blue progress cards ranked from least to best. And if you take a look real quick, there are 2 intrigues, there's 1 constitution, there are 2 warlords, 2 saboteurs, 2 diplomats, 2 weddings, 2 deserters, 2 bishops, and thankfully 3 spies for lots of fun. Okay, let's go on over to the yellow progress cards. Starting off at the bottom of the barrel, we have Merchant Fleet. And the reason it's so low is because once you see my most favorite yellow progress card, it's going to make a whole lot of sense. Now, Merchant Fleet, you can trade in a single commodity or resource at a 2-for-1 rate, but it's for the duration of that particular turn, and as soon as you end your turn and pass the dice, then that 2-for-1 rate goes away, and then you have to wait till you get another Merchant Fleet, or build on a port, or get merchant later on in the game. Now, it is pretty good early on, I would say, because early on, you're probably not built on a port, maybe 1 port at most, with your starting settlement and city placements, and you may be trying to trade in to get a road and a settlement or get another city on the board, which will then lead to further production. So it's kind of like a stepping stone to getting onto a port or building up yourself to get more resources and commodities flowing in, so then you can just do more stuff at a quicker rate in the game. But other than that, you only get to choose 1 particular resource on that turn to trade in at a 2-for-1 rate. And like I said, once the turn's over, this card goes right back in the discard pile and gets shuffled back into the deck. And you're stuck hopefully waiting for more yellow progress cards to roll in. Hopefully you have enough cloth paid in so your city improvements are at least 2 or 3. So you can at least have the trade bonus, or at least have, a good hope that yellow progress cards are going to be coming your way pretty soon after using this one. Okay, so now moving on. Now the rest of these yellow progress cards are really good, so it was kind of hard to rank them. They're all really close in my opinion. But next we have Commercial Harbor. And this one I really like because let's say you have a bunch of, sheep that are just useless to you because you don't have a sheep port, you have enough knights and settlements on the board, and you're like, what else do I really need sheep for but to trade it in? Well, Commercial Harbor, once you play it on your turn, you can give a resource of your choice and offer it to any opponent, and they have to give you a commodity of their choice if they have a commodity. If they don't, then this card is effectively useless against that particular player, and then you move on to the next player. So let's say I had 3 sheep, and in the scenario I described that they were useless, and I was playing a 4-player game. I would offer 1 sheep to each player, assuming each player had a commodity in their hand, and that's again when I'm kind of trying to count cards, go through the game log, make sure that they actually have commodities in their hand that they haven't yet spent. Maybe they just received last turn, or the turn that I rolled the dice, and they're getting ready to spend them, but I go ahead, throw out Commercial Harbor, offer up my 3 sheep to each player, and then they are forced to give me a commodity of their choice. Now the downside is you may be looking for paper because you're about to get 3 paper saved up because you already have level 2 on the Green City improvements. You're getting ready to get the science bonus, and that player might have paper, but they also might have coin in their hand, so they might give you the coin knowing that you're about to get the science bonus, and or they're also trying to get Green City improvements upgraded. So this doesn't always guarantee you're going to get the commodities that you want, but you are getting commodities in general, and they are very, very valuable, as I've shown in all of my Cities and Knights videos, in terms of building up to get towards metropolises and getting all of these really good progress cards in your hand to use for on yourself and against other players. And yeah, the rest of the story writes itself in any Cities and Knights video you watch, or in any Cities and Knights game that you play. Now, another downside for me for Commercial Harbor is that I have to give an opponent a card, a resource card, in order to receive a commodity. And of course, you don't want to give players cards if you can just take cards from them. So that really brings us to our next yellow progress card, which is Trade Monopoly. So unlike Commercial Harbor, Trade Monopoly allows you to declare one certain type of commodity, and any player with that commodity has to give you 1 of that commodity. So let's say you're getting pretty close to getting the blue metropolis, and you have 2 coin in your hand, and you know that a 11 just got rolled, and at least 2 opponent players had cities on an 11 ore, and it wasn't shut down by the robber. So you're like, okay, great, I rolled the 11, I have Trade Monopoly in my hand, I'm going to go ahead, use it, declare coin. I already have 2 coin in my hand, I have level 3 on the Blue City Improvements, which also gives me the Politics bonus, and I'm going to go ahead and use Trade Monopoly on coin because I know I'm going to get at least 2 coin because at least 2 other players had cities on that 11 ore that just got rolled. So you're gonna then jump up to 4 coin, and you already have level 3 on the Blue City Improvements. You're gonna go ahead, steal their coin from them, pay 4 coin, get the blue metropolis. In this scenario, no one has it yet, and you're gonna be off to the races with that extra 2 victory point jump. So Trade Monopoly, I love it just a little bit more than Commercial Harbor because although you may not get up to 3 progress or commodity cards, you will get exactly what you're asking for. And if you've been watching the game log, watching what other players have been receiving and then spending, you know for a fact that you're going to get something of what you want, and that you will not have to give resources to any players to receive these commodities that you're looking for. So just a little bit better than Commercial Harbor in my opinion. And now we will step it up. We're getting into the real top tier yellow progress cards. Sorry for the glare on that right one. But we have Resource Monopoly, and instead of getting 1 card from every player like you do with Trade Monopoly, Resource Monopoly, you just get resources, you do not get commodities, as the name would suggest. You get 2 cards of any type of resource that you declare. So for example, you are, for whatever reason, you're like, okay, I'm going to build 3 city walls in a single turn. And I know that brick just got rolled a lot from all these different numbers because there's a couple brick hexes on the board. And you know these other players are holding on to a bunch of brick because it's mainly being used for roads and settlements, but roads aren't being built a whole bunch in Cities and Knights. At least the winning players, or the players that have strategized enough and played enough Cities and Knights games, know that Longest Road is no longer the most important factor when it comes to Cities and Knights. It was in Basic Catan, but not so much in this expansion. So you're like, you know, for whatever reason, I want to build 3 city walls, so I need 6 brick because I haven't built a single city wall, and city walls cost 2 brick per city wall. I can build up to 3, and you'd use 1 resource monopoly, and you choose declare brick. Every player who has at least 2 brick must then give you those 2 brick. If they only have 1 brick, then they still send 1 your way. It has to be up to 2. So that can be, this card can be very hot, especially if you have a bunch of knights on the board that are deactivated, and you see that the barbarians are close to attacking. You're going to go ahead and use your resource monopoly on wheat and see how much wheat you get from other players. Then you can just activate all of your knights and watch as the barbarians invade, and those other players that were hoping to activate their knights on the next turn or whatever are now unable to because you took 2 of their wheat, and maybe that's the only 1 or 2 wheat they had, and now they have to either destroy a city, or because you activated so many knights with all the wheat you stole, you get Defender of Catan and get a victory point. So resource monopoly also can come in handy if you're trying to build a city and you just don't have a lot of ore coming in, but you see other players getting ore. You can steal their ore because you might also have a couple wheat around in your hand, and then get yourself a city out on the board and just have some more production coming your way. So resource monopoly, very, very handy to have. You can see there's a lot of them, so chances are you're going to see it pop up a lot throughout the game, assuming players have built cities on sheep and are getting a lot of cloth and spending that cloth to upgrade the yellow city improvements. Second best, we have Master Merchant. Wow, what a card. I remember when I first played this card, I was just playing the real life board game. I wasn't playing on Catan Universe because I didn't discover Catan Universe until maybe a year after playing the real life board game. And by that time, Catan Universe was still in its beta mode. But anyways, man, Master Merchant, when I read the description, I'm like, this can't be a card. This card is way too powerful, especially in very critical moments in the game, and especially late in the game when you're getting ready to make moves to win. So you choose any player who has more victory points than you. Generally, you're going to choose a player that's winning the whole game so far in terms of victory point race, and you're just going to go ahead and look at their entire hand and choose 2 cards of your choice. Any 2 cards you want. Now, it's only 2 cards, but it's almost like going to the bank in the game, because if you think about it, you're going to use Master Merchant on a player who's winning, right? Generally, if they're in the lead and it's later in the game, they probably have built themselves up enough that their production is pretty high. So you're going to realize that, you know, they're always going to have a good amount of cards in their hand. So chances are they're going to have a very diverse hand in terms of different resources, different commodities, and using Master Merchant on them will basically let you choose 2 of whatever you want. They may not have every single resource and every single commodity in their hand, but they're going to have a good selection. Now, don't use this if they only have 1 card in their hand, because you're just going to have to take that card. Try to use it, you know, I know they're winning and maybe they're getting ready to build some more victory points, but hopefully they have at least like 5 or 6 cards in their hand, and you can pull 2 away that they might have really needed in a critical moment and use it for yourself, or just keep it away from them. So something to keep in mind with Master Merchant. Every once in a while, playing Cities and Knights, I will get 2 Master Merchants in my hand, and kind of like let's see, is it wedding that I was talking about earlier? I will wait to build any victory points until after I played either one or two master merchants, depending on how many I have in my hand, so that I get more cards in my hand first. Then I can decide and then say, hey, I was going to do this, but now because of these 2 or 4 cards that I got using master merchant, I can now do this in my turn, and maybe that's a way better turn to have to really screw someone else over or further my victory points or set me up for some really, really competitive scenarios late in the game when I kind of put myself back in the game and give myself a really good chance of winning and being stacked up equally against these other good players. So, with that said on Master Merchant, let me tell you about Merchant. And wow, guys, let me just tell you, I had no idea there were six Merchant cards in the yellow progress card stack. You did just see my 100th Catan Universe video where I was playing Cities and Knights against my buddies, and although I was playing against my buddies, they did not give me a break whatsoever. They went try hard to the max, and I went try hard just as hard back, if not harder. And my one buddy at one point had 3 merchants in his hand, and I had 1. So I was like, maybe there's a maximum of 4, but there's actually a maximum of 6 merchant cards. And I am just now realizing that for the first time. Let me know down in the comments if you are also realizing this for the first time, or if you already knew it, you are just more big brain than I am when it comes to Cities and Knights. So Merchant, one of my all-time favorites, because not only when you place it down on any hex do you automatically get a victory point, but you also get to trade whatever resources on that hex at a 2-for-1 rate until someone else uses Merchant and steals Merchant away from you, which would pull you back a victory point, boost them ahead a victory point once they place Merchant down on one of their hexes, and then they would be able to trade in at a 2-for-1 rate. Sometimes, if you can get Merchant early on in the game, I'm talking about when the Barbarians have maybe only attacked once, that means that probably not many other people have that many Yellow City improvements. So if you can get Merchant as early as possible, place it on the board, you'll have it for a very long time usually in that scenario. And that is a very, very good thing to have, because not only do you not need to go to that port anymore, and it might be out of reach, out on the board, or unrealistic to build to, you can just have the Merchant on that hex and then work towards going for another port if you need another port. That way you can end up basically having 2 ports and having that extra victory point. So very nice thing to have, and it is contrasted from best and worst of Merchant Fleet, because again, like I said, Merchant Fleet, it only lasts for the turn, and there's a card that's much better than Merchant Fleet. And thankfully, when they made these progress cards, they gave you 6 of the better version of Merchant, and only 2 of the worst version of Merchant. So I really like how they did that. I think it's really cool how, you know, Merchant can be stolen so much with the fact that there's 6 Merchant cards. Keep in mind, in every progress card stack, there's 18 in each. So if you figure 6 Merchant cards out of 18 yellow progress cards, a third of the time, you're going to be drawing Merchant from the yellow progress card stack. So a third of the time, you know, you could be gaining an extra victory point and gaining a 2-for-1 port essentially. But keep in mind, another player has that equal of a chance to draw Merchant and then steal it right away from you. So Merchant is not forever, but it is a very, very good piece of the strategy puzzle. So Spy and Merchant, my top 2 on the blue and yellow side. And just a quick recap, we have 2 Merchant Fleets, 2 Commercial Harbors, 2 Trade Monopolies, 4 Resource Monopolies, you really got to watch out for those, 2 Master Merchants, and 6 Merchant cards. Very interesting how on some of the blue progress cards there's only 2 of each for a lot of them, and then yellow progress cards there's like 2 of each, but then 6 and then 4. And then another thing to keep in mind, you see in the blue progress card side, there is a victory point card that gets revealed immediately when you draw it. On the yellow side, I did not fully pay attention to this, but there is actually no yellow progress card that is like Constitution or like Printer that I'm going to be talking about on the green progress card side soon in this video. There is no yellow one, so you cannot draw a yellow progress card and hope to earn a victory point immediately from it. I think they did that because they gave you the 6 merchant, and because the yellow progress cards are so good in terms of stealing resources that may have been a little too overpowered to also have a yellow progress card that gave you a victory point, because merchant is already doing that, plus letting you trade in a 2-for-1 rate. So I think that's pretty balanced that they did that, and just let the extra victory point be in the merchant card and not a separate card on its own that immediately gives you a victory point and then gets put right back in the pile. So very interesting that they did that. Okay, for our last 18 progress cards, we will go to the green side, and we will start off at the lowest of the low. It is Engineer. It allows you to build a city wall for free, and of course city walls allow you to hold more cards in your hand when a 7 gets rolled, and potentially not have to burn cards as much when a 7 gets rolled. So earlier I was talking about maybe using Resource Monopoly to steal a bunch of brick to build 2 or 3 city walls. I don't know why you would do that, but maybe brick was only getting rolled frequently in a certain span of the game. So let's say you have Engineer and you haven't built any city walls. You play it, you put 1 city wall underneath one of your cities. You know, it should be around your city because it's a wall, but when you see it played, either in real life Catan or on Catan Universe, the wall is like a flat square that goes underneath your city, so it's kind of funny. There's some, is it irony, I guess, in that sense? It's not really a wall, it's more of just like a platform that goes underneath your city and elevates it. But I digress. If you play 1 city wall with this card underneath one of your cities, you are then allowed to hold up to 9 cards, and if a 7 gets rolled, you will not lose any cards. So originally, remember, if a 7 gets rolled and you have 8 or more cards, you have to get rid of half of your cards, of course rounding down with odd numbers above 7. Now with the 2 city walls, you will then place another city wall on the board if you got Engineer again later in the game, but that second city wall is not allowed to go under that first city with a city wall already underneath it. That second city wall, it has to go on a second city that you have on the board. So you have to build a second city before you can even hope to put a second city wall out on the board. So at that point, with 2 city walls, you will be allowed to hold up to 11 cards without getting rid of half your cards if a 7 gets rolled. Now, the ultimate trifecta is if you draw Engineer a 3rd time, of course you can just pay 2 brick out of your hand to build a city wall at any time, assuming you have a city with no city wall underneath it. But if you draw Engineer a 3rd time, you can place a 3rd city wall on the board, assuming you have that 3rd city out on the board, and that will allow you, with all 3 city walls, you can hold up to 13 cards without losing half your cards to a dice roll of 7 without the robber coming in. So that is very, very hot later in the game, but as I'm going to show you, there are just better green progress cards in comparison to the Engineer if you're just looking at each progress card by itself. Now, let me know before I move on from this point if you want to see a more in-depth progress card video where I show you strategies where I combine this certain blue one with this certain green one and this certain yellow one and what have you, because I have played enough games of Cities and Knights to know that this progress card works well with that one, and this one works well with this other one. And if you pair these two or pair these 3 or 4 sometimes, you can have a very, very hot turn. And I'm still discovering all the combinations you can have, because keep in mind, there's 54 progress cards. You know, you might minus the 2 victory point cards because they're just an immediate victory point, then they go away. So I guess you could say you have 52 progress cards that can work with each other in one way or another. So let me know if that type of video would interest you. That'd be a lot more in-depth. And a very good strategy. Always good to have the most strategy you can in, I guess, pretty much anything, but in terms of Cities and Knights specifically. So yeah, Engineer is pretty good, but there's just way better ones. So we're going to move on to Printer. And just getting a victory point over being able to hold more cards in your hand when a 7 gets rolled is just always better. It's kind of, you know, kind of non-negotiable, kind of non-debatable in my opinion. Although we are, you know, talking opinions here, but it's more of a fact, really. I mean, sure, you could find some way to debate that, but taking a victory point over being able to hold more cards in your hand is just my preferred way to go about Cities and Knights. But again, just like Constitution, it's very boring. You just get the victory point, and then you move on with the game. And maybe early on you draw a Printer because you paid some paper to get some green city improvements, but early on in the game, you want green progress cards that are going to help you do stuff so you can build yourself up to have more production later in the game. And this is not going to help you with production. It's just going to help towards your victory point count. But early on, that's not the most helpful. Okay, so now we move on to Smith. And Smith is very good, especially if you have level 3 on the blue city improvements built to. So that would net you the politics bonus, which allows you to upgrade level 2 knights to mighty knights or level 3 knights. So you could be in a battle with someone for Defender of Catan victory points. You both have 2 level 2 knights, which mean you both have 4 knight strength apiece. But then you go ahead and you're like, wait a minute, I either have the blue Metropolis or I have politics bonus, which is blue city improvements level 3. Let me just play Smith, upgrade both of my level 2 knights to level 3 knights, or aka mighty knights, and now I have knight strength of 6, whereas that other player is still stuck at 4. So Smith does upgrade your knights. It does not allow you to activate your knights, it just upgrades them to the next strength level, next power level, if you will. So it does say in the parentheses that the normal rules for promoting knights still apply. So keep in mind, if you do not have the politics bonus, level 3 on the blue city improvements, then you will not be able to upgrade any level 2 knights you currently have on the board to those level 3 mighty knights. You can upgrade level 1 knights to level 2 knights, or if you had 1 level 2 knight and 1 level 1 knight, you would only be able to upgrade the level 1 knight to a level 2 knight, and then you would have to stop there, and Smith would no longer be able to help you until you got, you know, another Smith later on when you had level 3 city improvements on the blue side. And of course, if you read at the bottom of the card, mighty knights may not be promoted because there is no level 4 knight, although that would be really cool. The maximum knightage you can get is a level 3 mighty knight. Now, although it says the normal rules for promoting knights may apply, or still apply, and I told you about not being able to get mighty knights if you don't have level 3 or the politics bonus on the blue side, you can technically still get a mighty knight out on the board if you do not have level 3 on the blue city improvements. And the only way to do that is actually if you have the deserter progress card and you desert an opponent's knight and they choose to get rid of their level 3 mighty knight, and maybe that's the only knight they have on the board, and if you steal that from them with deserter, then they get rid of it, and you are then allowed to place that level 3 knight because you place a knight of equal strength that you stole from, assuming you don't have two equal knights of equal strength of the one you just stole. You're allowed to place it on any open road intersection that you have. Again, you could steal a level 3 Mighty Knight from an opposing player if they give it up from your Deserter card use on your turn, but you have to have the open road intersection to place it on, but you do not have to have the politics bonus in order to do that. But it can only happen with Deserter. You cannot get Mighty Knights via Smith unless you have the politics bonus. So just a distinction to keep in mind between Deserter and Smith. So Smith, very good, especially early on when you maybe were able to build 2 knights and they're both level 1, and then use Smith so you jump up to 2 level 2 knights or 4 knight strength, and the other players are still scrambling to even build a knight or activate it. In this scenario, the barbarians maybe haven't not yet invaded for the first time, so this would almost guarantee you a Defender of Catan victory point. Stepping up, we have road building, and of course, you know, if you've watched any of my basic Catan or Seafarers gameplay without cities and knights, you know that road building or longish road is near and dear to my heart. I absolutely love stealing it from players. I love taking it initially and holding on to it or stealing it back, because having longish road just is such a good feeling. It's such a power move, in my opinion, in basic Catan, because you know someone's going to go for it eventually, so why not let it be you? So with this progress card, you get to build 2 roads for free instead of spending resources to build them. And of course, if you're playing Cities and Knights with Seafarers, you can place 2 ships or 1 ship and 1 road, which is very cool that they laid that out in the description of this card, because you could be in a situation where you want to build 1 road this way, but you have another settlement on the end of your road system on the coastline. You want to build a ship out towards another small island, depending on what seafarer scenario you're playing. So very, very hot card, especially if you have the exact cards in your hand to build a settlement, but not 2 roads, but you have this progress card in your hand. You can go ahead and play it, build the 2 roads, and then place down that settlement with the cards you had in your hand, and have a very nice turn that way. And especially early on, it can help you build out, because a lot of the times you're focused on getting cities and city improvements, and this helps you build out to another good spot that you will later maybe want to build up to a city if it's a spot that is at the intersection of 3 different hexes. Hopefully one of those hexes is going to produce commodities with a city on it, and you'll be rocking and rolling. Moving on, we have mining, and mining is very, very good to have. Of course, you can take 2 ore cards from the bank for each mountain. Oh, they call it mountain hex here. So we have the different names I have for that resource type is mountain, ore, coal, and stone. So very interesting that someone seems to call it a different thing, different nomenclature for it everywhere you go, right? But I guess the game calls it the mountain hex, and it produces ore, as it states in the card. So let's say you have a settlement and it's touching 2 ore hexes. Let's say you have a city somewhere else on the board in Cities and Knights, and that's touching 1 ore hex. So you're touching 3 different ore hexes in total. Mining would net you 2 from each of the ones you're touching, so that'd be you're touching 3. 2 times 3, of course, equals 6. You would get 6 ore just by playing this mining card. And you might be in a situation where you're like, I really need to get some more knights on the board. I have a bunch of sheep because the dice rolls were bringing in a lot of sheep, but not a lot of my ore numbers were getting rolled. This card would allow you to complement your ore to the sheep you already had, and then build some knights, upgrade some knights, and then be on your way. It also, of course, will help you in building cities, because you may have a lot of wheat coming in, but you only have 1 city built on 1 ore hex, and your settlement is built on some other stuff that's not ore. So if you only had one ore hex, but it wasn't really getting rolled, but you did get mining, because again you were paying paper to get the green city improvements, and you could use mining once you got it in your hand, get those 2 ore from that ore hex that maybe was only getting rolled once or twice, and then gather up the cards to build your city on one of your settlements on the board, and then of course in that regard be on your way, get more production coming in. Okay, so mining is good because you're going to get 2 ore from every ore hex you have, but I think even better is going to be irrigation, because of course wheat is just so crucial in Cities and Knights. I've displayed that in a lot of my Cities and Knights gameplays. You probably experienced it in a lot of your Cities and Knights gameplays. So you could be trying to activate knights, build settlements, build cities, trade in, this or that, and irrigation is going to allow you to do just that. The other thing with wheat is that because it's so hot of a resource, generally everyone is going to want to trade you a different type of resource and maybe even commodity to get that wheat that you have, if wheat happens to be, you know, dry for a certain spell of the game and people are really trying to get their knights activated because the barbarians might be close to invading, and they're like, okay, this guy just used irrigation, now he has a bunch of wheat, I need to just maybe get one of those wheat because the barbarians might be 2 or 3 spaces away from invading. I really need to activate my knight because it's deactivated and I don't want to lose my city. I might make a kind of a generous offer to get one of the wheat that he has after he's done activating his knights and doing whatever he wants to do with the wheat, and then any left over, let me make a good trade and get some of that wheat. So wheat is always a very good bargaining resource, unless there's a bunch of wheat on the board and like everyone's built on wheat and it's just flowing like water essentially. Then at that point, you know, irrigation would only be useful for you doing stuff for yourself. But I think it can also be a good bargaining chip if you have enough wheat left over after you're done activate your knights, maybe building some cities, so on and so forth. Of course, just like mining with irrigation, you want to make sure that you're on a wheat port or you have merchant on the wheat hex, because then this will be even better, like way better. If any leftover wheat that you're not going to use that turn, you could trade in at a 2-for-1 rate for some commodities to upgrade city improvements, or for, you know, a brick or a wood or what have you to build a road or this or that, then this card becomes that much better. So it's the potential of these 2 cards that really boost them ahead of road building and smith and engineer, things like that. So after irrigation, we have crane. I absolutely love crane in situations where I am at level 3 on any city improvement color and I'm struggling to get 4 of whatever commodity it is I need to get that metropolis. But then crane comes along and it's like, here buddy, let me help you out with that. You only have to have, you know, 3 paper, let's say. If you already had level 3 in the green city improvements, you would have 3 paper, and crane would act essentially as your 4th paper, and you would only need to spend 1 less than the amount you needed to get to that next city improvement, which in that scenario, spending 3 paper with crane would get you to level 4 on the green city improvements, assuming you already had the science bonus. And then you would get level 4, and if no one else had level 4 on the green city improvements, you would get that green metropolis. So very good card to have. Another good thing to have it with is if you're really struggling for progress or commodities, and let's say you're at level 2 on the yellow city improvements and you finally get a second cloth in your hand, you can use crane and that will allow you to get the level 3, which will give you the trade bonus. And then maybe later on, commodities will start getting rolled a lot for you and they'll start really coming in. And that trade bonus is going to help you later on with trading in any commodity at a 2-for-1 rate. So crane, it's just so handy because my main focus is building cities, building city improvements to get metropolises. And Crane is right there to help you out in some key situations, especially if you want to steal a metropolis from someone and they're chilling at level 4 of the blue city improvements, let's say, and they're holding onto that blue metropolis, but you start sneaking up, you build a level 3, you might even build a level 4, and then you're like, man, now I need 5 coin to steal the metropolis before they pay 5 coin and secure it away permanently for themselves for the rest of the game. But you go ahead, you get Crane, and then you only need 4 coin to get the level 5 on the blue city improvements to steal their metropolis as well. And you're just really, really glad you had Crane, because you maybe in that situation you didn't have the resources or the ports to trade in for that 5th coin, but Crane was there to save the day. So very, very good card to have. I don't know if you have 2 Cranes in your hand at once, if you can use them back to back to, let's say you only had 1 paper paid to get the level 1 green city improvement and you had a second paper in your hand. I'm not sure if paying 2 Crane would get you level 2 green city improvement for free, or would it just be 1 paper and 1 Crane still to get the level 2 green city improvement? I'll have to try to experiment with that. Hopefully one of these games I can get 2 Crane in my hand and try to use them for something like that. Or if I had level 2 city improvements on the green side and I was trying to get to the science bonus, but I only had 1 paper, but I had 2 Crane, would that bring the commodity count needed down 2 by using 2 Crane, and then I just needed the 1 paper to get to level 3 and get the science bonus? But I'm going to have to experiment with that because it's not explicitly stated in the description of this card. And one last thing I'll say about Crane, it's very, very nice to have if you only build on one, resource that, one type of resource is going to produce one type of commodity. So for example, you build on only lumber, but you don't build on ore and sheep because for whatever reason other players took those good spots for their starting settlement and city placements. You only build on lumber, then you're only getting paper throughout the game, and then you use Crane to get to level 1 on a different color, and maybe that kickstarts some different color progress cards coming in and really diversifies your strategy, early on in the game, and allows you to build some things you didn't think you would have been able to do because you were only getting paper and you weren't getting those yellow or blue progress cards early on or later in the game. So very, very cool card. It's one of my favorites. But we now have medicine in the top 3, and medicine is just so good because instead of paying 5 cards for a city, you only need 3 cards if you play medicine. Of course, 2 ore and 1 grain. So how hot is that? You almost only need half the cards you would have originally needed. I have had certain games where I had both medicines in my hand and I had 4 ore and 2 wheat, and I was able to build 2 cities for almost the price of 1 city, almost the regular price of 1 city. That's right, because it would be 6 cards total, the 4 ore and the 2 grain. But it rarely does happen that you get both medicines in your hand, but it can happen. I've had it happen. But just being able to use medicine in a crucial part of the game where you didn't have a whole lot of cards in your hand, you had 2 exactly, maybe you had 3 ore and 2 wheat and a sheep, and you really wanted to build a settlement and a knight and then activate that knight, you could do that if you had medicine, because you would pay the 2 ore, the 1 grain, then in that scenario you'd be left with 1 ore, 1 wheat, 1 sheep, and then that would be your activated level 1 knight. So very, very nice card to have, especially if you're in a race with someone else for city improvements to get towards a certain metropolis, and you can place another city on the board that much faster with medicine, You know, when you do these long videos, you really need to have a water bottle on hand or some water, because your mouth gets dry after an hour of talking, I'll tell you that. So, the other thing I wanted to say about medicine is that to screw other players over early on in the game, I'm talking about before the barbarians invade for the first time, each person is trying to just place a level 1 knight down and activate it. But if you draw medicine before the barbarians attack for the first time, you can go ahead, upgrade your starting settlement to a city, so you now have 2 cities on the board. So if the barbarians invade and there's three players playing, there would have been 3 knight strength if each player only built 1 level 1 activated knight. But there would have been 4 cities on the board because the other 2 players had 1 city apiece, but you used medicine, you upgraded your starting settlement to a city, therefore you had 2 cities. So there were a total of 4 cities on the board, making the barbarian strength a total of 4, but the knight strength was a combined 3 because, again, every player only had 1 level 1 activated knight apiece in this scenario. Therefore, using medicine can be used to screw over other players because you built that extra city, so everybody has to burn a city in this scenario, but you keep the other city that you just built or the initial one you placed, because with medicine you got 2 cities in that scenario. You burn a city, but you'll have 1 left over. So there, I gave you a reason to use medicine to screw over other players. Just another finer strategic point of the game. Coming up to our top 2, we have Inventor. Inventor is it's just one of the best, really. You can actually take all these 4 in a line. You could take Inventor, Alchemist, Merchant, and Spy. If you had one of each of those cards in your hand, you would have a very, very good turn, because with Alchemist, you could roll whatever you want, and then you could swap some numbers with Inventor, like we're going to talk about. You could use Merchant to gain a victory point, and then be able to trade a resource at a 2-for-1 rate for a while. You could steal a progress card from someone with Spy. So yeah, these are kind of my top 4 progress cards, because that's just a really, really hot progress card hand to have. But back to Inventor. Of course, you can swap numbers on the board. Let's say you have a weak 3 on a lumber, and you really want to upgrade that lumber because you have a city on it, so you know you want to get more paper going, and you know that in this particular game, in Cities and Knights, let's say 5s were getting rolled really, really well, a lot. So you're going to use Inventor, you're going to swap, give away your 3 and steal someone's 5 and put it on your lumber hex, give your 3 to whatever resource they had a 5 on, and you're going to be good to go from there. You just hope that later on someone else doesn't use Inventor and steal a good number that you were built on and take it away from you and then give you a kind of a sucky number like an 11 or a 10, what have you, if they stole a 5 or a 9. Of course, with Inventor, you're not allowed to choose 2s, 12s, 6s, or 10 or 8s, because if you choose a 2 or 12, chances are you're giving it to someone else, giving it to a spot on the board that you're not built on. I can't see anyone wanting to bring a 3-11 or a 2 or a 12 over to their side of the board that they're built on. So that's why I think they limit you by not allowing you to move 2s or 12s, because that would just shut someone down so much that they basically want to get any more of that resource or commodity that they were built on, because 2s and 12s rarely get rolled. I've had games where either 2 or a 12 doesn't get rolled the entire game, and I have the dice roll statistics to back that up that I always showcase at the end of my Cities and Knights videos. And of course, Basic Catan and C4s. I think I also show the dice statistics. Now you cannot move 6s or 8s as well, because I guess that number is just so hot that they want it to be fixed on the board. They don't want it to move whatsoever. Of course, the only way to eventually, in certain scenarios, get rid of a 6 or 8 is in Cities and Knights or Seafarers with the Greater Catan scenario playing on that scenario. But that's just a whole nother topic for another time. But in Cities and Knights, you cannot steal any 4 of these numbers. You cannot move them around on the board whatsoever. But you're going to want to take this card and you're going to want to steal a 5 or a 9 from another player and put it on a hex that you're built on, so that way you have better numbers overall, because after 6s and 8s, 5s and 9s have the next most probability of getting rolled in terms of dice roll combinations with the 2 dice. Now, one last thing I'll say about Inventor, besides it being, amazing, of course, whenever you have it, you want to try to use it as soon as you can so you can get better numbers for yourself, and also just in case someone else might have Spy, because if someone uses Spy and you have Inventor, you better be sure you know what's going to leave your hand. Unless you also have Alchemist, then it's kind of a toss-up. Now, with Inventor, if you already have a bunch of 5s and 9s, but you really want a different number over in your area to add some number diversity, you could actually it could complement itself with Alchemist if you also had Alchemist to use on a later turn, or you're hoping to get Alchemist on a later turn, because let's say you had maybe like a 10 or a 4. Let's go with 4, just to talk about some different numbers. So you have a 4 on a wheat, and you use Inventor, instead of stealing a 5 or a 9, because maybe you already have some, you steal another 4 and put it on, let's say, your sheep hex that had a 3 on it. Then you would have a 4 on a wheat hex and on a sheep hex, and then later if you got Alchemist, you could use Alchemist to force the dice roll to roll a 4. That way you would get a bunch of cards instead of just a few cards from just 1 5 or 1 9 that you had. So that is another way that you can use Inventor to the best of its capability, where you can grab another of the same number, bring it over to your area that you're built on, so you can get a bunch of resources and or commodities on that specific roll, assuming you have Alchemist, or you can just hope for the number to get rolled. And that's just another thing to keep in mind with Inventor. Finally, one of my all-time favorite progress cards, we have Alchemist. You play this card before you roll the dice. If you roll the dice and you forget to play it, then you then have to wait till your turn comes around again after all the other players have taken their turn, and you just, again, you really hope that no one has Spy, because they are going to steal your Alchemist, and that's going to be a very sad day for you. So, of course, before you roll, play Alchemist, roll whatever you would like. You can even roll a 7 if you want, which is absurd. It's unorthodox, it's insane, but you can do it. You can actually Alchemist a 12 or a 2, which you rarely would want to do. Funnily enough, I believe I've used Alchemist to roll a 2 or a 12 in a very specific situation where only I was built on a 2 or 12, and I wanted it to be just me getting resources and or commodities that specific turn. And that specific 2 or 12 was giving me just what I needed to build just what I needed on that turn. So very, very nice card to have. Of course, it gives you the stipulation that you resolve the event die first before moving on with the 2 number die. So of course, in Cities United you roll 3 dice. So that event die is the one that's either going to roll Barbarians Advancing, or blue, yellow, or green on the die. So you're going to take care of that first, but then with Alchemist, because you rolled whatever you wanted to roll, you force the dice to roll that instead of a random number. You're then going to benefit from whatever you rolled. Hopefully you rolled something like a 6 or an 8 that you were built on, or maybe 3s weren't getting rolled a whole lot, so you Alchemist a 3 because you had at least 2 or 3 hexes that you were built on that were, well, actually I think you'd only have two of the same number on any given board. There might be a few boards where there's like 3 of the same number on the board, but that might be kind of more on the rare side. But anyways, Alchemist is always handy to have. There's never really not a use for it compared to like something like, Engineer. It's just always very Very nice to be able to use it for yourself. And another thing is that if someone had just used Inventor and you had Alchemist in your hand and they took away one of your good numbers, whatever they swapped that good number with in its place is probably a worse number, but you could use Alchemist and Alchemist that worse number they just gave you, because you still want that hex to be producing resources and or commodities on that turn. So that's when Alchemist could also come in handy. So I did not expect this video to go over an hour, but I got really in depth with each progress card. And before I do my wrap up, I just want to give one recap. On the green side, we have 1 engineer, 1 printer, 2 smiths, 2 road buildings, 2 minings, 2 irrigations, 2 cranes, 2 medicines, 2 inventors, and 2 alchemists. So on the green side, it's basically 2 of each, except for engineer and printer. The blue and yellow are much different in that regard. So wrapping things up, thank you guys for watching. Like I said, it was a little bit of a longer video than I expected, but I enjoyed making it because, of course, Cities and Knights is just still my favorite expansion, and there's just, you can see just the progress cards alone provide a ton of strategy and tons of combinations of pairing certain ones up with each other. Like I gave a little hints about Inventor and Alchemist, or Merchant and Irrigation, but there's just, or my top 4 Spy, Merchant, Alchemist, and Inventor. There's just so many different good strategies with combining progress cards for, even better plays, even better turns. By themselves, they're easier to rank them, but the real story, the real strategy that comes with being really, really good at Cities and Knights is being able to use what you have coming in to have the most effective turn to keep advancing yourself throughout the game in Cities and Knights. So again, 54 progress cards, 18 in each color. I want to thank you guys for watching. Let me know if you want to see a video on a further breakdown of the progress cards, where I talk about combinations of each and how certain scenarios in the game will allow you to use this combination of cards for the most effectiveness or what have you. I'd be happy to do it. Just let me know the interest, and let me know y'all's favorite progress cards, and then also let me know your least favorite progress cards in your experience playing Cities and Knights in Catan. Thank you guys for watching. I'm going to need another drink of water, and I hope y'all take care. Adios.